The sky was on fire. Captain Ilias Voss stood at the shattered remains of Earth's orbital defense station, his body locked in place by the artificial gravity, but his mind drowning in the horror below. Through the reinforced viewport, he saw oceans boiling, cities reduced to molten craters, and firestorms sweeping across entire continents. The attack had come without warning. No demands, no ultimatums, just an unrelenting bombardment of plasma lances and kinetic strikes from the fleets of the Galactic Concord. The Concord had always preached peace, stability, and unity. Humanity had believed them. They had traded, negotiated, and even bled in the Concord's wars. And for what? To be erased like an inconvenient mistake. Captain, a voice crackled through his earpiece. It was Lieutenant Merrick, his second in command. The last civilian transports just left the surface. We're down to a handful of warships. If we stay any longer, we die here. Voss clenched his fists. Die? That was the easy choice. That was what the Concord wanted, for the last defenders of Earth to fall in glorious but meaningless battle. The war had already been lost before it began. The Concord had moved in perfect coordination, jamming all communications and striking at key military hubs before Earth's fleet had even scrambled to respond. But dying wasn't in his plans. Get everyone aboard the ironclad, Voss ordered, turning sharply from the viewport. The battle station was a lost cause. Half its systems were offline, and its automated defenses had been shattered in the opening salvos. The ironclad was the only warship left under his command, a heavily modified battleship with experimental stealth systems and reinforced plating. It wasn't enough to take on the Concord's armada, but it might just be enough to escape. As he sprinted down the corridor, emergency lights flickering in the thick haze of smoke, he saw the last of his crew making a run for the escape tubes. They weren't just soldiers. There were engineers, scientists, civilians, and children among them. The few who had managed to flee the surface before it was too late. A massive tremor rocked the station, sending debris crashing from the ceiling. Voss barely managed to keep his footing as the floor beneath him groaned under the force of another direct hit. Move, 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 Merrick shouted, waving people toward the docking tubes. Status on the Concord fleet, Voss barked as he reached the bridge, overriding the failing security locks to bring up a tactical display. Closing in. We have 4 warcruisers moving into range. They're preparing to board, Merrick said. Voss gritted his teeth. If the Concord captured them, they wouldn't just execute them. No, they'd turn them into examples, parade them across the galactic networks as proof that humanity's resistance had been crushed. He exhaled sharply. Not today. Voss slammed a command into the terminal. Prepare the ironclad for an emergency jump. We're punching our way out. But Captain, no arguments. Voss turned, locking eyes with his crew. We live today. We get revenge tomorrow. The Forsaken Sons would not die here. The ironclad emerged from the emergency jump into the cold silence of deep space, its hull scared and smoking from the escape. Ilias Voss sat in the captain's chair, scanning the dimly lit bridge as his crew worked frantically to stabilize the ship. They had lost shields, their primary thrusters were barely operational, and their power reserves were running on fumes. But they were alive. Status report, Voss ordered, rubbing the exhaustion from his face. Merrick, standing at the tactical console, let out a heavy sigh. We took severe damage in the jump. Navigation is fried, and the warp core is unstable. We won't be able to make another jump for at least a week. A week. That was an eternity with the Concord hunting them. Voss knew their pursuers wouldn't stop until every last human ship had been wiped from existence. Where the hell are we? He asked. Unknown sector, said Alessia, their navigation officer. She tapped at the flickering holomap, frustration clear on her face. We were aiming for the Kuveri drift, but with the damage, I can't tell if we even came close. Voss exhaled slowly. The Kuveri drift had been their best bet. a region of lawless space outside the Concorde's control, full of pirates, smugglers, and mercenaries who might be willing to take in a few desperate exiles. Now, they could be anywhere. A warning alarm blared across the bridge. Proximity alert. Merrick snapped, his fingers dancing over the controls. I've got multiple signatures closing in. No Concorde markers, but they're moving fast. Voss's grip on the armrest tightened. He had barely gotten his people out of one massacre. He wasn't about to let another one happen. Get weapons online, he ordered. Sir, we barely have enough power to keep life support running, Alessia reminded him. Then we find a way, Voss growled. The ironclad drifted in the void, its engines too weak to maneuver, as the unknown ships surrounded them. The tension on the bridge thickened as the crew braced for what was coming. Then, a transmission crackled through their comms. Well, a rough voice drawled over the speakers. What do we have here? A ghost ship drifting where it shouldn't be. Merrick muttered a curse. Pirates. Voss activated the comms. This is Captain Ilias Voss of the Ironclad. We are not looking for a fight, but we will not go down easy. Laughter erupted over the channel. A warship with no shields, no engines, and a crew running on fumes. Please, you're dead already. You just don't know it. Voss's mind worked quickly. He knew their ship was too damaged for a real fight. But he also knew something about men like this. Pirates weren't loyal to anything but themselves. If you know who we are, he said, his voice dangerously calm, then you know we just escaped a Concorde extermination. And if you know that, you know we're worth more alive than dead. Silence. Then the pirate's voice returned, a little less amused. I'm listening. Voss leaned forward, a ghost of a smile on his face. Let's make a deal. The pirate captain who called himself Goran, the Red, stood before Elias Voss in the dimly lit cargo bay of the Ironclad. His crew, a ragtag mix of species, watched with wary eyes, fingers twitching near their weapons. Voss wasn't impressed. He had seen killers before, real ones, the kind who didn't need to posture. These were scavengers, opportunists looking to strip the Ironclad for parts and leave its crew floating in the void. But Voss had other plans. You're asking for a lot, Goran said, arms crossed over his scared chest. Protection, fuel, safe harbor. What exactly do I get in return? Voss met his gaze without hesitation. A war. The pirate's smirk faltered. Let me guess, Goran said. You want revenge on the Concorde. I don't want revenge, Voss said, his voice quiet but cold. I want reckoning. And I want you to be rich beyond your wildest dreams. Goran chuckled. That's so. And how's a crippled warship and a bunch of starving exiles going to make me rich? Voss nodded to Merrick, who activated a small holo-display. A three-dimensional projection flickered to life, revealing schematics of an old but powerful weapons cache, the lost armory of Harkenveld, a warlord who had ruled this sector 100 years ago. It was said to contain enough firepower to topple a small empire. You've heard the stories, Voss said. Everyone has. The Concorde scored this sector trying to find it, but they never did. He leaned in. We know where it is. The room went still. Even Goran's crew shifted uneasily. The pirate captain narrowed his eyes. And why haven't you taken it yet? Voss gestured at the ironclad around them. Because we needed a way to get there. The warp lanes in that region are unstable. We needed someone who knows the routes, someone who can move without drawing attention. His smirk returned. Someone like you. Goran stared at the holomap, rubbing his chin. The old warlord's vault was the stuff of legend. The Concorde had deemed it a myth after decades of fruitless searching, but pirates thrived on myths, especially the kind that promised treasure and power. Finally, Goran chuckled. You're either a genius or a madman, Voss. Voss's expression was unreadable. Maybe both. Goran turned to his crew. Prep the ships. We're heading to the Bleeding Maw. The crew exchanged glances, some hesitant, some eager, but none argued. Merrick leaned in close to Voss as the pirates got to work. "You're really banking on this, huh?" Voss exhaled. "It's our only chance. If the vault was real, it would give them the firepower they needed to fight back. If it wasn't, they were dead men anyway." But Voss didn't deal in uncertainties. The Forsaken Sons were done running. It was time to arm themselves for war. The Ironclad and Garen's pirate fleet emerged from warp at the edge of the Saularun system, their ships gliding like shadows through the void. Before them, the Concord's grandest shipyard stretched across the dark horizon, a massive orbital station, surrounded by defense platforms and a fleet of patrolling warships. It was the heart of the Concord's military might, the forge where the next generation of warships was being built. And it was about to burn. Elias Voss stood on the bridge of the Ironclad, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the swirling chaos of traffic moving between the shipyard's many docking rings. Thousands of workers, engineers, and bureaucrats moved about their business, utterly unaware of the doom approaching them. "They still don't know we're here," Merrick whispered. "They will soon," Voss replied. "Status." Alessia, the navigation officer, tapped at her console. "Our stealth systems are holding, but the patrols are getting closer. We'll only get one shot at this." Garen's face appeared on the comm screen, his sharp grin filled with anticipation. "You sure about this, Voss? That's a lot of firepower down there." Voss's expression remained cold. "The Concorde doesn't fear pirates. They fear the impossible. We're about to show them that humanity isn't beaten." Garen chuckled. "Then let's give them a nightmare they'll never forget." Voss turned to his crew. "Begin the attack." The silence of space shattered as the Forsaken Sun struck. From the darkness, pirate ships and human warships surged forward, unleashing a storm of destruction. The first target was the outer defense grid, dormant, expecting no threats from within their own territory. Bombing runs from Garen's attack craft reduced the platforms to fiery wreckage before they could even activate. Then came the fleet. Conquered patrol ships scrambled to respond, but the Ironclad and its allies were already among them, tearing through their formations. Voss's modified warship punched through their lines like a battering ram, railguns spitting hypersonic slugs that shredded enemy hulls in a single shot. Pirate raiders swarmed the docks, boarding Concorde cruisers and turning them against their own. The shipyard itself was the final target. Merrick fired the signal flare, a bright, searing beam that lanced through the blackness. A moment later, the plan came to fruition. The sabotage teams, already hidden aboard transport ships docked at Saularun, activated the explosives they had planted days prior. The entire station shook as detonations rippled through its core, gutting power systems, sending docking arms tumbling into the void. Entire sections of the shipyard buckled and collapsed as the workers inside screamed and fled. Panic spread like wildfire. A Concorde dreadnought, the herald of Dominion, tried to rally its forces, but the Ironclad was already upon it. Voss's crew unleashed everything: torpedoes, railgun slugs, plasma lances. The dreadnought, the supposed symbol of Concorde's invincibility, cracked apart in a series of thunderous explosions, its broken hull drifting lifeless into the ruins of the station. It was a massacre. The battle lasted less than an hour. When the last of the Concorde ships either fled or were reduced to wreckage, Voss surveyed the field of victory. Zal Aran burned, its once proud shipyards reduced to smoldering debris. Humanity had taken its first real revenge. But this was just the beginning. Voss turned to his crew. "Prepare a transmission. Send it to every Concorde world, every colony, every fleet." Merrick grinned. "What's the message?" Voss's eyes burned with cold fury. "Tell them humanity is still here." The message spread like wildfire. Across the Concorde's vast empire, human refugees huddled in the shadows of alien rule, believing their people had been wiped from existence. But then they saw it: the burning wreckage of Saularun, the shattered dreadnoughts, the symbol of Concorde's power reduced to ruins. and they heard the voice of Elias Voss. Humanity is still here. We are not broken. We are not defeated. We are the Forsaken Sons, and we will never kneel again. The words echoed through the underground resistance cells on conquered worlds. Human slaves, forced into servitude by alien masters, whispered them in the darkness. Entire fleets of Concord loyalist humans, pressed into service under threat of annihilation, began to question their orders. The war had begun. Aboard the Ironclad, Voss and his crew barely had time to celebrate their victory before reality set in. The Concord's response would be swift and brutal. He knew they would send their most elite hunters after him, and he had to be ready. Merrick stood at the war table, scanning the reports coming in from their informants. We've got movement near the Kilari Belt. Multiple Concord war groups converging. They're looking for us. No surprise, Voss muttered. We took their shipyard. They have to retaliate. Alessia frowned, her fingers hovering over her terminal. It's more than just a retaliation. They're deploying the Primarch's fleet. The room went silent. The Primarch. Voss's jaw clenched. The Concorde had many admirals, many commanders, but the Primarch was something else. A warrior bred for one purpose: extermination. Wherever he went, resistance burned to ash. We can't fight him head-on, Merrick said. Not yet. Voss nodded. Then we don't give him a direct fight. We bleed him, make him chase ghosts, stretch his forces thin. He turned to Garen, who had been lounging against the wall, watching with interest. Your people know the underworld better than anyone. Can you get word out? The pirate captain smirked. What kind of word? That there's a bounty on Concord warships, Voss said. Any independent crew, mercenary, or rogue trader willing to hit their supply lines gets paid in weapons and tech. If the Concorde is hunting us, we'll make sure they bleed for every step they take. Garen chuckled. Oh, I like the way you think. Voss turned back to the war table. Alessia, set course for the Karthos Rift. There's a human colony there, one of the last holdouts. If we can rally them, we might just have the beginnings of a real fleet. Merrick exhaled. We're really doing this, aren't we? Voss looked around the bridge. His crew, once exiles, now had purpose burning in their eyes. The Forsaken Sons weren't just survivors anymore. They were warriors. We started something at Salarun, Voss said. Now, we finish it. As the Ironclad roared into warp, the embers of humanity's rebellion sparked into an inferno. The Ironclad dropped out of warp at the edge of the Karthos Rift, a vast expanse of shattered moons and dying stars. Hidden within the drifting wreckage of ancient battles was Karthos 7, one of humanity's last true colonies, a fortress world that had resisted the Concorde's rule longer than any other. Voss had been here before years ago, when Karthos 7 had still been a proud outpost of human defiance. Now, as the ship approached the planet, he saw the scars of war, burned-out orbital stations, shattered defense platforms, and conquered patrol ships circling the upper atmosphere like vultures. Defense grid is mostly offline, Alessia reported. Looks like they've been under siege for a while. Merrick studied the readings from the scanners. The Concorde isn't committing their full strength here. Just enough to keep the colony strangled, but not enough for a final assault. They're waiting for the defenders to starve, Voss muttered. Garen, standing nearby with his usual smirk, chuckled. Typical Concorde arrogance. They think patience will win them this fight. He crossed his arms. So, what's the plan? Go in loud or play this smart? Voss considered. They didn't have the firepower for a direct assault, but they had something better, an opportunity. If Karthos 7 still had a fighting force left, then maybe, just maybe, humanity could turn this siege into a war the Concorde wasn't ready for. He turned to Merrick. Prepare a stealth drop. I'm going down there. Merrick's eyes widened. You? Personally. If I send a transmission, the Concorde will intercept it. If I send a small strike team, the defenders might think it's a trick. Voss exhaled. But if I go myself, they'll listen. Merrick hesitated, then gave a sharp nod. I'll get the team ready. They came down in the dead of night, slipping past Concord patrols in a modified stealth shuttle. Voss, Merrick, and a handful of hand-picked soldiers landed just beyond the colony's outer ruins, moving quickly through the wreckage of a once great city. The air smelled of fire and metal, the remnants of past battles still fresh. They weren't alone for long. A sudden movement in the shadows. Then gunfire. Energy bolts seared through the air as armed human resistance fighters emerged from the rubble, their weapons trained on the newcomers. Hold your fire, Voss shouted, raising his hands. A tall, battle-worn woman stepped forward, her face streaked with dust and blood. Who the hell are you? She demanded. Voss met her gaze. Elias Voss, captain of the Ironclad. We're here to break the siege. The woman's eyes narrowed. Voss. The same Voss who burned Sal-Arun. Merrick grinned. The one and only. The woman studied them for a moment, then lowered her weapon. You're either the dumbest man alive, or the one we've been waiting for. She turned to her fighters. Take them to Commander Doran. Voss exhaled. The real battle was about to. The underground command center of Carthos 7 was a relic of humanity's defiance, hidden deep beneath the ruins of the old city. Dimly lit corridors led to a war room carved into the bedrock, its walls lined with outdated but functional holoprojectors. Maps of Concord fleet movements flickered in the air, alongside tactical readouts showing the colony's dwindling resources. Voss and his team stood before Commander Doran, the hardened leader of Carthos 7's resistance. The man was a veteran, his face lined with years of war, his eyes sharp with the weight of impossible decisions. He sat behind a war table, arms crossed, studying Voss with quiet intensity. You have no idea how many men have come through here promising salvation, Doran said, voice gruff. None of them are alive today. Voss met his gaze without flinching. I'm not here to promise salvation. He gestured to the hologram of Sal-Arun's burning remains, still cycling on the war room's display. I'm here to start a war. Doran's brow furrowed as he looked at the image. That was you. Voss nodded. And it's only the beginning. The Concord has ruled with fear, but fear cuts both ways. We made them bleed at Sal-Arun, and now they're scrambling. We don't have to fight them head-on. We have to break them piece by piece. Doran leaned forward. You want Carthos 7 to throw what little we have left into a suicide mission. Voss stepped closer. No, I want Carthos 7 to become the heart of the rebellion. You have people, weapons, experience, but you've been fighting to survive. It's time to fight to win. Merrick pulled up a new holo display, showing targeted Concord supply routes, vulnerable stations, and key fleet movements. We've been tracking their logistics. The Concord is stretched thinner than they want to admit. If we hit them in the right places, we can force them into a war they can't sustain. Doran's officers murmured among themselves. Some looked skeptical, but others nodded. They had been losing for so long. Maybe the idea of striking back ignited something long buried. Doran remained silent for a long moment. Then he exhaled and leaned back. You're asking a lot. Voss took a step forward, his voice calm but unyielding. I'm offering a choice. Keep fighting the way you have been, alone, cut off, or join us and take the fight to them. He glanced around at the gathered officers. Humanity isn't dead. The Forsaken Sons are rising, but we need Carthos 7 to lead the charge. Doran studied him, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he reached out and tapped a console. The holo map shifted, displaying the colony's remaining fleet, scared, outdated, but still deadly. I'll need to hear your plan, Doran said at last. Voss allowed himself the smallest of smiles. The Concord thinks they're hunting us. He gestured to the fleet display. Let's show them they're the ones being hunted. The battle for humanity was about to begin. The void above Carthos 7 became a battlefield before the Concord even realized they were under attack. The Forsaken Sons had spent weeks preparing, using the intelligence gathered by Voss and his team to set a perfect trap. Now, as the Concord's siege fleet tightened its grip on the colony, humanity struck back. The Ironclad emerged from the shadow of a dead moon, leading a strike force of Carthos 7's warships and Garen's pirate fleet. They moved like phantoms, silent until the moment of execution. Then, all hell broke loose. Railguns thundered, plasma cannons roared, and torpedoes streaked through the void, slamming into the unsuspecting Concord vessels. The first wave of enemy cruisers crumbled in an instant, their hulls torn apart by the relentless assault. What had once been a siege became a slaughter. On the bridge of the Ironclad, Voss stood tall, his expression unreadable as he watched the chaos unfold. "They're scrambling," Merrick said, grinning as he analyzed the tactical readouts. "They didn't expect us to fight back this hard." "They never do," Voss murmured. "But we're not done yet." Alessia looked up from her station. "We have an incoming transmission from the Concord flagship." Voss didn't hesitate. "Put it through." The holoscreen flickered, revealing the cold, calculating face of the Primarch. His silver eyes burned with restrained fury, his ornate battle armor gleaming under the artificial lights of his command deck. "Elias Voss," the Primarch said, voice smooth as steel. "You've caused quite a mess." Voss tilted his head slightly. "I've only just begun." The Primarch's lips curled into something resembling amusement. "You're a fool if you think you can win this war. You and your kind are an anomaly, one that the Concord will correct." Voss's voice was calm, unshaken. "Humanity was never an anomaly. You tried to erase us, but we endured. You took our worlds, but we rose from the ashes. You think you're facing a rebellion." He leaned forward, his gaze cold as the void. "You're facing extinction." The Primarch's smirk faded. "You have sealed your fate." The transmission cut. A second later, the Concord's remaining warships reorganized, their flagship leading a counterattack. The tide of battle shifted. Advanced Concord destroyers, reinforced by reinforcements from deep space, pushed back against the Forsaken Sons. "We won't last in a drawn-out fight," Alessia warned. Voss nodded. "We don't need to." He tapped a command into the console. Across the battlefield, hidden explosives, planted weeks ago in the debris fields surrounding Carthos 7, detonated in sequence. The explosions disrupted Concord formations, severing communication lines and throwing their forces into disarray. Then the second phase began. From the planet's surface, Carthos 7's planetary defenses, thought to be crippled, came online, launching a devastating barrage of railgun slugs and missile swarms into the enemy fleet. The Concord's tactical advantage evaporated in seconds. The Primarch's flagship, the Herald of Unity, took a direct hit from the planetary cannons. Fire and debris erupted from its hull. "They're breaking," Merrick said, breathless. "Give them no quarter," Voss ordered. The Ironclad led the final charge, cutting through the remnants of the fleet with merciless precision. One by one, the Concord ships fell. And then, at last, the Herald of Unity exploded in a blinding fireball, its wreckage swallowed by the void. Silence followed. Then, a cheer erupted across the comm channels. The impossible had happened. The Forsaken Sons had shattered a Concord fleet. Humanity had won its first true victory. Voss exhaled, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him. This was only the beginning. The Concord would come back, stronger, angrier. But now, humanity had hope. And hope was a weapon. He turned to his crew. "Send the message to every human colony, every hidden resistance cell." Merrick grinned. "What's the message?" Voss's eyes burned with cold fire. "The Forsaken Sons have returned, and we will never fall again." In the depths of space, the flames of rebellion burned bright. The reckoning had begun.